The Associate Dean for Development and Alumni Relations. And I know that many of you are trying to choose which school you will be a student at, but I think the far more important decision is which school do you want to be an alumni from, and to envision life after a year or two when you're at a school. And I certainly think that's an important decision, and that's what this panel is about, to help you envision what it means, what life as a SAIS alum means, and how SAIS figures in the career paths of this collection of prominent alumni that we have gathered here for you today. We have a couple of them that are late, so we will indulge them and allow them to come up here as they arrive. So what I will do is introduce each of them very briefly, allow them to speak 5 to 7 minutes about life after SAIS, and then we'll open it up to you for questions and answers. Our first speaker, if I may, Matt, since you're here, is Matt Kaczmarek. He's a graduate of SAIS of '09. He's an international economist for the U.S. Treasury Department and has worked there since graduating from SAIS. While at SAIS, he interned with the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House, and before SAIS, he served as the political director and campaign trip director for Phil Angelitti's gubernatorial campaign in California and at the Office of the California State Treasurer. Matt?
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I wrote down a whole bunch of things to say because I love coming back here and love talking about SAIS, so feel free to cut me off if I said too much, but I'll try and say this succinctly. First, it's an honor to be back here, especially with this prestigious, accomplished panel of alumni. I obviously represent the near experience of having been a SAIS alumni, so I hope that what I say is valuable to you. I was sitting where you are 4 years ago, and this day, this open house made the decision for me that SAIS was the right place. So hopefully this will be a good panel for you. I thought I'd talk really briefly about what I'm doing now, 2 years out from my SAIS experience, and how SAIS kind of helped me prepare for it. As the Dean mentioned, I'm a recent graduate. I graduated with a degree in Latin American Studies in 2009. I originally grew up in San Francisco, California. I did my undergraduate work in geography and international relations at UCLA. I worked briefly as a financial consultant here in Washington before going back for a public policy fellowship with the state treasurer in Sacramento. When I was in Sacramento, I discovered sort of finance and how governments finance themselves, both their current spending, which in California, as we know, is very bad, and long-term investments like major infrastructure. When I came to SAIS, it was really because I wanted to take that experience that I had and elevate it to an international level consistent with what I had studied in my undergraduate work, and also get a stronger quantitative background to put on my resume. It was difficult. It was a challenge. I knew I hadn't taken very much economics coursework previously, and foreign language actually kept me from graduating with my undergrad degree for a little while, so I came here in spite of the foreign language requirement rather than because of it. But grad school is good to challenge yourself. I was attracted by the intellectual community that presented itself here at SAIS and also the alumni network, obviously. I never predicted that while I came here I would become a huge nerd for international macroeconomics, but it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And preterm is really what did that. You probably heard about the economics preterm program today. It's an opportunity to really immerse yourself in this field of international affairs that is quite critical, and I think you'll find pervades the experience that we've all had in our careers, although mine's quite limited right now. And I ended up really enjoying macroeconomics. I took over half of my SAIS curriculum in economics here. I ended up TAing for 4 semesters, and my last semester I was very excited to get a teaching award for my work in economics. So if you think it's not you, you may be wrong. I studied, at the same time, I was a regional concentration in Latin American Studies, which really, the regional concentrations here at SAIS I think are a little misleading, because you think you're going to come out being an expert in the region, which is true, but you'll also come out being an expert in whatever the particular frame of analysis that region at SAIS specializes in. In Latin American Studies, it happens to be the political economy analysis, or the politics of economic policy in Latin America. In some of the other regions, I know Southeast Asia Studies tends to be more, theoretical IR driven, although there's courses throughout all these different IR fields, throughout all the regional departments. Where you are interested in a specialty based on a region, it really makes sense to match those up. I graduated in 2009, as I said, which was the height of the financial crisis, and you can imagine that private and sector employment options were fairly bleak at that time. I had done my internship the previous summer in an effort to make my resume a little bit more marketable to the private sector with the Treasury Department's Office of International Affairs. And luckily, I went through their recruiting process, and when I graduated, I was offered a full-time economist position with them. Now, when you think of international affairs, foreign affairs agencies, and government, Treasury, or any finance ministry for that matter, is probably not the first one that comes to mind. But the financial crisis in 2008 really brought out the role and elevated the role of Treasury, and it became higher profile. Treasury represents the United States in G7 policy coordination, on the G20, on the boards of the IMF, the World Bank, and the other international financial institutions. And our role, I wrote this down so I get this right, is to advance policies that promote global economic stability, financial sector deepening, and more broadly, international economic development. So we have a pretty important role in foreign affairs as far as the United States goes. Those are obviously very modest tasks, but the international affairs team at Treasury is pretty low-key as well. We have 185 people in our entire international affairs organization. We're in the main Treasury building down there next to the White House with cherry blossoms around it right now. But it also has one of the most dedicated, entrepreneurial, and intellectually curious group of government employees I've ever met in my life. And that's for a good reason, because a plurality of international affairs staffers at Treasury come from SAIS. For the past 2 years there, I've managed an evolving portfolio in our Western Hemisphere office. Let's not make this too dramatic, I am responsible for our bilateral economic relationships with Brazil, Argentina, and Venezuela. And as my office's senior desk officer, I also do all of our regional analysis for Latin America as a whole. I've served as the U.S. representative to a G20 experts group on financial inclusion with 19 other representatives, as you can imagine. I've twice represented the United States on the Board of Governors at the Inter-American Development Bank, or the IDB. I've also staffed the Secretary's 2 recent visits to Brazil and the President's recent visit to Latin America. So I have a job where I get to be an analytical nerd, but the things I read and the things I have to say are listened to and read by people who value my opinion, which is exciting. I'm constantly in an environment where I'm challenged to improve my analytical skill set and where I get to feel like I'm having a real impact on economic policy issues that matter in the world today. Needless to say, I at least feel like I have a pretty cool job coming out of SAIS. And the issues that we focus on at Treasury, analyzing fiscal, monetary, exchange rate policies of other countries and regions, global macroeconomic and financial architecture, and policy coordination are the real-world, real-time challenges in global economics that I studied at SAIS under professors who are now the same practitioners that I work with every day in my job, which is pretty cool. I think this is exactly the career that SAIS prepares you for. It's one that allows you to combine the big picture, education and theory, and critical reasoning with the practical skills in economic analysis and political analysis, finance, strategy, policy writing, all the things you learn about here at SAIS. Now, I do want to say there's a common criticism of international affairs schools that you're probably aware of, that the big picture curriculum focused on cultivating critical reasoning prepares you to be a CEO or a senior policymaker, but it leaves you a little underprepared for your first job out of school. And I hope that what I can tell you here is that I think the challenge to you as a student is to weave the right mix of courses when you're looking at any international affairs school between the tangible skills that you need to match this bigger picture education that you're not going to get in any other professional program. And SAIS does very well at offering both. Let me briefly, before I wrap up, say something about the opportunities for personal development and the SAIS network. So first of all, this building, you've spent a day here. It's not much, it's fairly modest, but it's amazing how quickly it can become home. When you come to SAIS, you're immediately immersed in a warm and welcoming community of scholars in this building, on this block, and throughout this city and around the world. You could have a rich and rewarding experience without ever leaving the building. You can be a research assistant or developing your teaching skills like I did. There's student government, career clubs, and social organizations. In my own experience here, I spent 1 year as the president of the Organization for Gay and Lesbian Students. We organized monthly happy hours that were very popular, everyone enjoyed. We also organized career panels to talk about issues that affected our community, like domestic partner policies in the Foreign Service, which are quite interesting. We also welcomed NGO leaders from around the world who worked in this community to talk about their work in promoting civil rights and equitable development. So we got to teach the school community something as well. And then, of course, outside that window, there's Washington. I was editor-in-chief of SAIS's scholarly journal, the SAIS Review. And through our advisory board, I had an opportunity to interact with some of the leading thinkers here in Washington, both to generate articles. And now, in my job, these are people that I can call on a regular basis because we have an established relationship. But the biggest selling point about going to school in Washington, as I'm sure others have talked about today, is the proximity to internships and jobs. And as the dean mentioned, I was working at the CEA on September 17th, 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed. And there was probably no more intellectually interesting position to be than inside the White House, watching the statements and the discussions that were going on there. It was less intellectually interesting to my friends who were holding job offers from Lehman at the time, but that brings me to my last point, which is the SAIS network. You probably don't realize how strong it is, honestly, until you leave here, but it forms a really tight community and institutions throughout Washington and around the world, both in embassies and the World Bank and the IMF. And I was telling Dean Wilson that my job has sent me to 16 countries in the 2 years that I've had it, and in every single country I've had a SAIS classmate that I've been able to visit while I was there. You know, I had drinks with a colleague on the roof of a hotel in Dar es Salaam. We have a huge community of students from my class that's growing in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and it's amazing. There's a large community of us here in Washington, but we're also all the way around the world as well. Once a week I have lunch with a group of friends that we call ourselves the DCBS, or the Dead Cat Bounce Society. It's an inside joke based on a course we all took with Ann Krieger, who's a SAIS professor and former first deputy managing director of the IMF. And she challenged us to think critically about all these kind of issues in modern global economics. And once a week we get together, we read the newspaper, we talk about issues, we talk about, you know, reports we've read, countries we're working on, economic dynamics, and we always end the conversation by saying, what would Ann think about this? You know, it starts with a Friday happy hour when you're here. It ends with late nights upstairs in the library. And everyone, regardless of where they go around the world, will end up back here in Washington. And you'll be in DuPont Circle, or you'll go to Lucky Bar around the corner for 25-cent wing and beer night. And you'll always be able to reconnect with students who are doing really, really interesting things, both here in Washington and around the world, and really having an impact. So I encourage you to come. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Matt. That was fabulous. I'd like to come again. This is wonderful. And that's the amazing thing about the alumni community, which is my job to celebrate every day. But it's fun that every day also I learn something different that I hadn't known about. Our next speaker is Daryl Chappelle, who is currently the director of Freddie Mac's Six Sigma program, where he works on advancing initiatives related to President Obama's Making Home Affordable program. He is a former senior vice president for Bank of America, where he worked for 6 years. He is also a former Peace Corps volunteer who served in Costa Rica. He received his MIPP from SAIS in 2009. Thanks, Daryl.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all here. It's very exciting. I recall being out there myself a few years ago and decided to come here regardless of the panel. So hopefully, hopefully you'll feel the same way. Like Amira mentioned, I'm a 2009 graduate. My background is a little bit different from the typical SAIS graduate. I have a financial services background. I currently work at Freddie Mac, which is in Northern Virginia. I think some of you might have heard of Freddie Mac and something about mortgage problems or something. It's a very, very exciting place to work. I've been there for a couple of years. It's a challenging environment, but it's also very, very rewarding because I can apply a lot of conflict management skills that I picked up here from SAIS, and it really works. So trust me that it definitely works. The other part of my career has focused a little bit on the functional. So along with the financial services, you heard about Bank of America, but also I have a functional background in what's called Lean Six Sigma. How many have heard of Lean Six Sigma? Okay, a few of you, that's good. A crash course in that. It's came from Motorola way back in the 80s. It's all about how do you make your processes more efficient? How do you make things defect-free? How do you eliminate waste? So that's been my whole focus on the last few years. I picked up that skill set from General Electric. So combination of functional skills in Six Sigma and Lean, and then also the industry skills in financial services. That's my background. The academics, I also have an MBA from the University of Chicago with a focus on economics and also international business. Several years ago, we won't talk about how long ago I got that degree, but it also has helped me get to where I've been so far in my career. What I do want to spend time on, though, is really focusing on why I chose SAIS and really help you make that decision if you're still on the fence on what to do. And then one other thing I want to share is basically, you know, in terms of the motivation to attend SAIS, for me, it was based on just really learning. You probably know, based on my background, I had a lot of work experience. I have an MBA. But I chose SAIS because I really wanted to continue to push the envelope and learn even more. And so you'll hear a little bit more of that as I go into on why SAIS I think could be a good fit for you. So I'm going to put this under the umbrella of the SAIS community, which is the culture here. And there's 2 points I would like to elaborate on with regard to the culture at SAIS. one is the coursework, which is practical and stimulating. And then the second area is the relationships. So you heard a little bit about the relationships. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So the coursework. Okay, so I studied as a master's in international public policy, which is mid-career. So in that particular program, there's 8 courses that I actually took. I won't take you through all 8 courses. You'll probably be asleep by the time I do that. But I will focus on 4 of the courses. I think some lessons learned from those courses might resonate as you make your decision. The first was economics and immigration. So I did a regression analysis looking on reverse migration to Mexico. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting, very practical, very stimulating. And so those are some of the things you can do here, very practical type of coursework. The second is, as an MIPP, I had the flexibility of choosing an independent study course. So I studied in Argentina. Another thing you should note, I actually commuted as an MIPP from Boston, Massachusetts. So again, a little bit unusual background, but I was able to study independently for that 1 semester with a very well-renowned professor here. Actually, very good experience. So you have that flexibility to create your own experience here, which has been invaluable for me. The third course was Global Investment Management. So here and you'll hear more about this in a moment, but here we had a lot of group work. The culture here at SAIS is focused on the group, not the individual. And that's really important. So you come in here as a group, you work as a group, you move as a group, and that's not the case with a lot of other institutions, a lot of other schools of higher learning. So in this particular global investment course, we actually had our own portfolio that we monitored over several weeks. And this is interesting because I influenced the group to put one of the portfolios, the selections that I actually have in my own, and so it was really painful watching that portfolio deteriorate over the course of the semester. And it was really, really painful. The other course is International Bargaining and Negotiation. This is a course that I continue to use. This is where you learn about conflict management. And so right before the course, I heard a lot about it. I joined in and really got a lot out of it. But practically, some of the skills I use is to buy my own house, my second home. Another practical skill, I mentioned the Freddie Mac environment and the lovely day-to-day arm-to-arm conflict that we deal with every day. I put that skill to use as well. It's very, very practical. So not just the academic, but also the practical experience that I took away from that course. And then there is another course. I know I said 4, but there's 5. The fifth course, this was, I classify it as a very scary course. It was really, I didn't know what to expect with this particular course. The reason that it was scary, it talked about trafficking in persons. So not only trafficking across different global countries, but also trafficking here in the United States, and in particular, even here in DC. And it really captivated my attention to learn about that these things went on. Call me naive. Yes, I've lived all over the world. I've done all these things in my career, but I had no idea to what extent this was occurring. So things like that you experience here at SAIS, being a part of this very strong university and program. The other category that I want to focus on about the community here is the relationships. And you heard a little bit about this. It probably sounds a little bit cliche, but it's very true. The relationships that I'm going to focus on are 4 points. The relationships with the other students. So you're going to come here, if you choose to come here, with students that are just as bright as you, very intelligent, very motivated, very diverse backgrounds from all over the world. And that's really going to be a sense of joining a broader group of folks, which is quite motivating. It's huge. You stay in touch with these individuals over time, you build your network, and it does make a difference in your career. The second group of folks are the faculty. And I'm not just saying that because they're here, but it's really true that I, to this day, keep in touch with faculty, and they are very helpful, even today, with different things that you might be dealing with in your career. So very top-notch faculty, often quoted in the press. One of our professors was quoted on NPR recently. Another was featured in the Newsweek publication. So this is top-notch faculty here. Nothing to compare, if you will, with other institutions. The third category of folks that have been crucial and instrumental is career services. Now, I worked full-time when I was going through my master's in international public policy here, part-time. So I know how you do that, full-time and part-time, but it was a full load. But career services was helpful just to bounce ideas off of in terms of my next move, or just how do I fine-tune my resume. They were always accessible, they were always willing to spend the time, and it was invaluable relationship with career services. The last group of folks that are very instrumental still is the alumni office. Very strong alumni group here. Recently I was here for an alumni reception for the MIPP students, which are the mid-career students, alumni. Very engaged alumni organization, well connected throughout the world if you need help or if you can reciprocate and help somebody else. So in conclusion, it's been an extremely valuable experience attending SAIS, in particular because of the culture, which is made up of the practical and stimulating academic program here, in addition to the relationships that you can build through the different parties that I already mentioned. And I'll end at this point, and we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Daryl. That was very informative. Our next speaker is Anita Antonucci. She has been the Senior Managing Director for the Aerospace Defense Government Group at Houlihan Lokey for the past 9 years. In this capacity, she has been the head of the Aerospace Defense Government Investment Banking practice, with additional responsibilities for transportation and business services. She was co-president for Quarterdeck Investment Partners from 1993 to 2002. She graduated from SAIS Bologna in 1993 and from SAIS Washington in 1994.
Well, I want to thank everybody for letting me come back here. I think Amir had it right when he said if we could do it over again, we probably all would. I have really very fond memories of my time at SAIS, and I can honestly say there is probably no 2-year period in all of the things that I've been lucky to be able to do in my career where I have met such a phenomenal group of people and had such great options and really significant guidance to explore a whole range of topics. And a lot of those are in the classroom. A lot of them are outside the classroom, even though they involve the subject matter that you came here to talk about. I did get to spend my first year in Bologna and then my second here in Washington. And they were remarkably different experiences, but they had a lot in common, which is all of that time with a really incredible group of people and faculty and curriculum that you're guided to and through. But the time spent with those people, not just writing papers and going through the curriculum, but just talking about things and getting to know them and getting to know a lot more about yourself through this company is really something you'll treasure through your whole lifetime, and you'll be lucky if you can ever find an opportunity that is so rich, in particular in the company that you keep going through the process. I am, as Amir said, I am now working as an investment banker. That was definitely not why I came to SAIS. It was a total accident, but one very much the kind of thing that can happen here. In my second year at SAIS, when I had first arrived back in Washington, D.C., I met a classmate who sat on one of the student government committees with me, who said, hey, what are you going to do after SAIS? I was a strategic studies major. It was going to be 1994, which was probably almost as bad a time as 2009 to be getting out of SAIS. And I said, well, I'm going to have to work in the private sector. I've accumulated some significant loans, but I really would like to do something that gives me the perspective on the private sector that a policymaker in security, international security, would need. And he said, well, I'm got an old boss who's starting an investment bank to focus just on aerospace defense. So that conversation, which took down in the basement, probably my first week here in Washington, led me to being a founding member of a boutique investment bank focused on the aerospace and defense sectors. Back in the early 90s, people were talking about things like the peace dividend, and industrial relations was a significant both policy issue, but also an area where policy was creeping into private sector decision making. So it was a very entrepreneurial effort. I didn't have a business background. I didn't have the kind of coursework now available at SAIS. I learned it all on the job. But I can say that my strategic studies background became very relevant very quickly, whether it was writing testimony for our little firm to give to the Congress on subjects like the peace dividend, or working with clients on what sorts of merger and acquisition options might make sense given the direction of the U.S. military policy. We built that firm for about 9 years, and 1993, I actually started as an intern while still here at SAIS. We sold the firm in 2002 to a big Wall Street public company. and I went to the firm I represent now, Houlihan Lokey, as a managing director, later promoted to the board of directors, and continued to build a mergers and acquisition and capital raising practice around the aerospace, defense, and government services sectors. I think that's a pretty good example of something said earlier. SAIS is not necessarily a very narrow focus on something that will help you get your first job, but I can certainly attest to the ways that my broader exposure first begun here at SAIS, but really cultivated through a lot of what I learned about myself here and a lot of the people that I met here, contributes to both my professional and my personal life here today. Professionally, you develop a level of international fluency, if you don't already have one coming in here, that is very applicable no matter what kind of business or policy you're going into. I work in a firm that does have 800 people around the world, in Asia and Europe, here in the U.S., and is debating its international expansion every day. I'm one of the few people, even though I haven't worked in international relations, so to say, for a lot of years, one of the few people who's just as comfortable talking about a deal in Europe as I am here, and just as comfortable picking up the phone to an international company to initiate a dialogue. You'll find that that is a real skill set you'll carry through, maybe not in your first job, but it will come back. And just the broader critical thinking as well, the ability to cross domains, from talking about how international military policy, how U.S. military policy might affect a company's future, to the economic situation, to the way that the banking crisis is affecting our whole industry. It makes me, I think, a much stronger board member today, not just for my firm, but now in working with a number of foundations. I'm lucky enough at this stage of my life to be seeing a lot of doors open to me, and I can trace my interest in them and qualifications back to things that I started working on here in the early 90s. For example, I sit on the board of the Shakespeare Theater Company here in town. One of the things I've gotten involved in them doing is a direct result of some of the things that Elliot Cohen in the Strategic Studies Department asked us to do when we were master's candidates. He had us read fiction. He said fiction is the way to understand warfare if you're not going to go and be there. And so this last year, as a board member, I was influential in bringing in a program on Afghanistan and a play about an infantry regiment's experience in Iraq. And those plays have been pretty influential both to the people who've seen them, but even the government is now bringing them back to use them as a way of educating people working in those regions. Another area where I'm building on the group of people that I met and the experiences I had here is through some work I'm doing with the Aspen Institute. It is one of the very many organizations that a graduate student here in DC has a chance to benefit from the things that go on with the Council on Foreign Relations in Brookings and Carnegie all across the street. Aspen Institute just down the road in DuPont Circle brought me in as a Henry Crown Fellow, which is the first chance I've had to use some of the political philosophy I took here at SAIS in the last 20 years, but as part of a project where they take a group of people through political philosophy and apply it directly to your work experience. And my candidacy to join the Henry Crown Fellowship at Aspen and my day-to-day experience working with people through projects there, very much shaped by my time here. So without a lot more, I think the panel has made some of the points I'd stress most heartily, which is the people that you meet, the coursework, and how relevant things that you might not have had prior experience in will become to your life going forward. But I'd say that probably the single greatest characteristic is just the many, many options that the people and the coursework and the general experience to expand your mind are going to present to you, some in the near term, but many, many over a long career path and personal path for you.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you for coming back. This is wonderful. Now it's my pleasure to introduce one of our faculty members and also an alumnus. John McLaughlin is Senior Fellow in the Merrill Center for Strategic Studies at SAIS. He led the review of lessons learned at the request of the Director of National Intelligence and served as Acting Director of the CIA from July to September 2004, and previously was the agency's Deputy Director from October 2000. Prior to that, he was the Deputy Director for Intelligence, Vice Chairman for Estimates, and Acting Chairman of the National Intelligence Council. He founded the Sherman Kent School for Intelligence Analysis, an institution dedicated to teaching the history, mission, and essential skills of the analytic profession to new CIA employees. He graduated from SAIS Bologna and SAIS Washington in 1966. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Amir. Well, you've heard some of the other alums say that if they could, they would do it all over again. I guess that's what I'm doing. I'm back here. I came here about 5 years ago after leaving the government, 32-year government career. I'll tell you more about that. And so I guess the way I could talk to you would be to say a few words about what SAIS meant to me way back then and what it means to me now. Actually, in many respects, very similar things. I came here to SAIS in the mid-1960s from a small college in Ohio, and I would say it's no exaggeration at all to say that SAIS really changed my life. I mean, it charted the future direction of my life professionally and in some ways even personally, since I met my wife just down the street here. I came at an iconic moment in the global struggle that culminated with the fall of the Berlin Wall, a large piece of which is right out here, and which often leads me to think, it's right out here if you haven't seen it, leads me to think sometimes about what that's really the symbol of my generation, wondering often what the symbol of your generation might be. It will be something. We don't know what that is yet. Also, I came here as part of what might be called, for lack of a better term, the kind of the JFK generation in international affairs. And if you've been inspired by politics recently to become interested in international affairs, it's very easy for me to identify with you because that certainly was the case with my generation. You know, I was an English major before JFK, before Kennedy came to my campus and spoke. I changed to political science the next day and eventually found my way to SAIS through a circuitous path. You know, I often think about those days here at SAIS because one of the things that students say to me now is something that I said way back then. Students say to me now, I'm in awe of my fellow students. And that's exactly how I felt way back then. The range of experience that you find in our student body is just stunning. And I continue to learn from students here based on the experiences they've had in the private sector, public sector, war zones, Wall Street, Peace Corps, all of the diverse backgrounds that they bring to this campus. So, you know, that's what SAIS meant to me back then. It launched me into a career in international affairs that allowed me to travel the world, influence events, meet kings, prime ministers, various rogues around the world, brief the last 5 of our presidents, either before they left office, during their office, or after they left, and a chance to do all of those things. And I would say in that period of time, it's no exaggeration to say that not a day went by that I was not influenced in what I was doing and what I was thinking by what I had learned here, both professionally and personally. Professionally because of the quality of the faculty, which is still extraordinarily high, and personally because of what I learned, frankly, from fellow students. So this was an extraordinary experience for me personally. Also, I want to emphasize what others have said about the SAIS network. I have stayed in touch with people from my class all of these years, and just because we were friends. And this was not a careerist thing to do. We were just friends. But lo and behold, one of them turned into the British ambassador to the United States. Another turned into the head of a major foreign intelligence service at the same time that I was the head of ours. That really worked out well. Another one turned into a very influential congressman who has since retired, Jim Leach. We knew from the day we walked in that Jim was going to run for Congress, and he did. You know, another turned into one of the world's leading authorities on energy policy, Ed Morse, who is still that and still very active. If any of you are interested in energy, you know the name Ed Morse, classmate of mine. Another wasn't a classmate, but just a couple years off, turned into the Undersecretary for Policy at the State Department, ambassador to Greece, and and NATO, and is now teaching at the JFK School. Very misguided. But nonetheless, still a friend and a graduate of SAIS, and extraordinarily loyal to SAIS. I'm thinking of Nick Burns, of course. So there's that network out there that turns out to be ascendant along with you. I'll talk about your ascent in just a moment. And turns out to be very helpful to you. So what does SAIS mean to me now? Because I'm back here. Well, I came here in 2005 after I left the CIA, turned in my badge on Friday, showed up here Monday, and was kind of, in a daze, as you are after government service. And I think, particularly that government service, and I think back to that period and how welcoming SAIS was to me then. I was simply offered a fellowship here at that time. Someone said to me, you can stay 2 months or 2 years. Well, I turned into a teacher here, and I've now been here 5 years, and what does it mean to me today? Well, I talked about my generation. I guess the way I would describe it to you is it's a privilege to really prepare a new generation to go out into the world and essentially to define it. I talked about the Cold War and the Berlin Wall. That's all gone. We're living at a time now that a scholar at Yale, Paul Kennedy, describes as essentially without a name. He uses the term a gap between strategic epochs. It's an interesting way to think about it. And so the world is out there really to be shaped and defined, and it's a privilege for me to kind of bring to students what I've learned about it and about the government and how it works and how the world works, and to see SAIS as a port of embarkation, if you will, for students who are going off into the world. I said we don't have a name for the world yet. We don't have a term like Cold War. We haven't had anyone write that defining essay that George Kennan wrote back in the 1940s. One of you could be the person to write that essay. You could here, while you're at SAIS, be inspired to understand the dynamics of the world and to capture that. My students are changing the world. One of the things I said in a smaller group today is that when you leave here, I can't promise you that you'll be running the White House or the State Department within 2 or 3 years, but pretty darn close. Pretty darn close. It became apparent to me after a couple of years that, I see my students coming in T-shirts and jeans and looking like students with their backpacks. And then 2 years later, they're all dressed up and pulling levers here in Washington doing something. One of them is the senior director for, one of the first students I had, the senior director for Iran at the White House. Pretty good deal. Another was, until Jim Jones left the job, had been executive assistant to the National Security Advisor. Another was the intelligence advisor to the six-party talks on North Korea. Another is in charge of terrorist finance at the Treasury Department, working principally on Africa. Another is helping to run the intelligence department at the Department of Energy. And on and on and on. Another has just written me a note from Egypt saying, I'm about to cross into Libya, working for Human Rights Watch. So if you're teaching here, you feel like you have your hands on a precious asset that is going to have an enormous impact on the world, more than you know. I didn't know when I sat here, right where you are, had no idea what I was going to do. No idea. I thought I didn't know. I got drafted, and I went to Vietnam, and one day while I was running for a bunker in the middle of a rocket attack, some old sergeant, as we dove into this sandbag bunker, says to me, kid, if you like this sort of thing, they have jobs like this at CIA. So, that occurred to me later in life when I was getting bored. I worked on Capitol Hill and did a lot of other things. So I signed up. So life is what, John Lennon said this right. Life is what happens while you're making plans. So you may not know exactly what you're going to do, but if you come here, I guarantee you're going to do something important and interesting. So I would just leave it there.
Well, thank you very much. Can you join me in thanking our panel with some applause? I'm sure you have some questions for our alumni. So please step forward. Please go ahead.
Oh, 1 second.
The question was about the alumni network in Europe.
The alumni network in Europe? Well, I think the alumni network in Europe is primarily strengthened by the fact that we have a location in Europe, and we have the Bologna campus in Europe, and we have a very strong network in London, which is our biggest campus overseas of all SAIS alumni outside of Washington and New York, which are our two biggest markets. But London is our biggest market, and actually our Director of Alumni Affairs for SAIS is here as well, and you can meet her. That's Margaret Frondorf right there, and I'm sure she would be happy to tell you more specifics about the alumni network. But we have career services treks that go to London, primarily for folks who are interested in finance and consulting, and they join students both from Bologna and from Washington, D.C. They go on career services treks, and our alumni play an important role in facilitating and hosting alumni in those.
I would just add to that, I just came back from Spain. We take some of our students at spring break on an international trip to study something, and we met with the alumni group in Spain. So there was a small group there, but as Amir indicated, very large groups in many other countries.
Any other questions?
Don't be shy. There are no indiscreet questions, only indiscreet answers,
I want to know when a member of the society in Maryland is going to do a magic trip for us.
Oh, my goodness. Do you know about this? Any other questions, though? There's a question there. Something will happen before the day is over.
Please show us the magic trick.
Jeez.
Okay, beyond that, it's been incredible hearing all of your stories. You're all doing incredible things, some of which pertain to what you did before you came here. Others are a complete 180-degree change. We've heard a lot throughout the day about people using their time at SAIS to cultivate leadership skills. We've also heard a lot about people coming here and just expounding on being in awe of their classmates. Do any of you have experience taking leadership in something, or did any of you have experience taking leadership in something at SAIS that you had previously had no exposure to, even if you were surrounded by people who had done it? And if so, what skills did you learn, or what skills ultimately did you find helped you take a stand?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that question. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the courses I took was global markets, and our focus was having this global portfolio that we created. So my role, even though I worked at a bank, my role was to corral this group of folks. It was a diverse team from Europe, Russia, South Korea, and the U.S. And so my role was to really serve as a person who could listen to each individual, but also pull out the skills of the members of the team that were not readily participating. So it was some skill that I really had to practice over several weeks, and I was proud to say our team was in second place in terms of having the highest return on our portfolio. And it was really good results, and it took a lot of teamwork, a lot of group work that I mentioned earlier. It's not just one individual, but also being able to provide some leadership to the group as well. So a combination of both.
Let me also say, I've talked a little bit about being an econ teaching assistant, and the funny thing about being a teaching assistant at SAIS is you there's obviously no undergrads here to boss around. So I wanted to get the teaching experience while I was in grad school. Didn't think I was going to be able to, but then was able to do it with my peers, which is an enormously nerve-wracking experience if you're supposed to help your peers learn something that you have never actually studied before SAIS yourself. And so, it became, I started a little rusty. My first semester reviews weren't all that great. But as you become more comfortable with whatever it is that you're doing, you learn very quickly, what the strategies are to succeed at it. And I would say that the things I learned from teaching here were how to prepare for something very quickly, how to read deeply and understand sort of what you need to know out of a whole bunch of information that's available to you, which is a critical skill for working in the government, how to present authoritatively and present like you have confidence in what you're actually saying, and how to choose what you actually should and shouldn't say. And then how to work with students, how to work with diverse communities, how to work with people who learn differently, who need things explained in a different way so that they'll understand it as well as you do. And then, how to celebrate with people in success when they all get A's, as they did my last semester. Maybe that's why I did well as a TA. I don't know.
I would just add that we think of leadership here. I won't talk about myself so much, but I will say what some of our students do now that amounts to training in leadership. I think of leadership as very important here because most of you, when you graduate from here, will soon be in positions of leadership, or even if you aren't, you can be a leader in anything you do because, frankly, as a SAIS graduate, people are going to look at you with a certain set of eyes and they're going to be expecting a certain kind of performance from you. So, for example, in my program, we take students, as I mentioned, on what we call a staff ride to Europe, usually to Europe, somewhere other part of the world sometimes, about 40 students and about 4 or 5 faculty members. The students entirely run this. They do everything from planning it to transportation, hotels. They essentially manage a week-long excursion overseas. A lot of leadership training, highly organized. This is true of many other programs here as well. Last year, the students themselves, a lot of initiatives come from the student body, organized, and the school supported a leadership training program at the mid-year break, about a 2.5-day program that was attended by about 50 students on a volunteer basis. And third, there are a lot of other programs here. I run one that I call, in a sort of jocular way, the Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's named after the Harry Potter series, of course. And the subtitle is How to Be Effective in Washington. It's essentially about leadership, So we're trying to teach you how to be street smart without turning you into muggers. But the idea, the idea is to give you a sense for how to operate in Washington while being effective and preserving your integrity. That is essentially a component of leadership. So I think it's sort of built into the woodwork here. Yep.
Go ahead. The lady with the microphone, go ahead first,
great.
and we can
Thanks,
pass it to you then.
Hi, my name's Tara. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Your stories are really inspiring. I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about what you think was the most pivotal component in helping you land your positions post-SAIS. Was it the alumni network? Was it the courses you took? Was it networking in school? Or was it extracurricular activities? If there's any advice that you could pass on to us into helping us land such inspiring positions as well, that'd be really helpful.
I'll go first. For me, I told you it was literally a classmate, right, who introduced me to the person that I ended up setting up a business with. So, look around you. You might find the person who's going to answer that question for you. But having spent a bunch of time talking with other alumni since then and having hired 2, I'll tell you that I think the secret is a lot more on you to figure out how to use this time, because the answers are so dramatically different from one person to the next. And I really think that the value of a SAIS education, as opposed to a really specific vocational degree like an MBA or other sorts like that, is that it really opens up a lot to you. And if you were to start too early trying to figure out how you're going to use the system to find a particular kind of job, you may not actually take advantage of all of this exploration that's going to go on over this period. And the Career Services Office here has developed significantly, and a lot of your classmates are going to provide an amplification of that because they've all had some career experience before getting here, and we'll introduce you to networks. But I do think a lot of it is incumbent on you to think about how to use all of this diversity as opposed to narrowing in on a specific leverage point.
I would agree with that. And thanks for the question. I'm sure it's the question that many have right now. So how do you get a job after the SAIS experience? It's a very important question. The way I'll answer it is two ways. Number one is how I did it. And then number two, I think, is another way you can actually go about it. It's cliche as well. Your network. So I actually got my current position through my personal network. I moved here from Boston, Massachusetts because of a connection at Freddie Mac. But when I was here at SAIS, what was extremely helpful is the Career Services Office literally went through a database, knew what I wanted to do, went through a database, identified particular people that they thought would be good for me to speak with. They did what I call a warm transfer. So they gave an email to the person. They copied me saying, Daryl Chappelle will reach out to you. I followed up. I had a meeting with a person at the International Development Bank. I sat down with them. I built a relationship. They were willing to get an internship there for me to take it to the next level. So it is definitely possible to leverage the career service route as well. And then it really relies on the relationship after that, you being able to build that relationship. And it's definitely possible. So it's very encouraging. It's a very good, strong office to do that, in addition to your personal network as well.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I can't even remember how I got my job other than that Army sergeant. But more important for you is how students are getting jobs today, and I observed this. It'd be misleading if I didn't say it's a tight job market, but our students are finding jobs. There's a couple of things working here. You've heard about our Career Services Office, which works very hard, brings in major employers, connects you up with them. The faculty work hard on this. I mean, all of us have contacts out there, people we can call, recommendations that we can direct strategically to people. Inevitably, it depends a lot on your initiative, that is, asking people to help with that sort of thing. There's also, I've noticed a pattern that by about mid-year, second year, a fair number of our students have jobs. Sort of toward the end of the year, there are a few who may not, and they're pressing hard to arrange it. The ones who are in pretty good shape at mid-year have usually started working on it in their first year. A lot of the jobs that people get end up coming out of internships that they do between their 2 years. And you've probably had someone today describe the range of internships that our students go into, largely through the Career Services Office, State Department, Defense Department, all of the think tanks and so forth. In those opportunities, you build a network, establish credibility, build a portfolio, and that usually turns into an opportunity later. So those are some of the techniques here, but there's, you're not sort of shoved out there on your own. The school is very supportive in thinking about jobs all the time.
Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll add since I'm still in the first job I got after SAIS. Mine came out of the summer internship, as I mentioned, and I would say I got the summer internship because if there's sort of a political economic agency here in Washington that wants to find high-quality interns, they turn to SAIS and they post the internship on the school announcement page, which is where I found it. I also manage our internship program now in my office at Treasury in the Latin America office, and where do I turn for interns but SAIS, obviously. So you get this cyclical network, and I think the school's reputation and the consistent quality of students it turns out with, like people have said here, very consistent basic skills where if nothing else, that a SAIS graduate or a SAIS student is going to be a good critical analyst. They're going to be able to ask good questions. They're going to be able to pick up on information very quickly. Generally, they're going to be able to write well, is something that people in the busy Washington policy world rely on. And so I think that's to you. I also just, to back up some of the other comments that were said, I think my experience, at least when I came here, is that everyone came in with a very notional idea of what they wanted to do, and then all of a sudden it blows up because you're exposed to so many things that you had never thought about doing before in your career. And slowly you spend the 2 years trying to narrow that and trying to focus that, and it's very hard for some people. But eventually through your faculty who help identify the key sort of routes that you can go through, or the your other students who have worked in those sectors that maybe you hadn't been exposed to before but can help introduce you to people, or the alumni that you interact with frequently. They have these panels. The career clubs, regardless of what sector you're working in, brings in alumni, brings in panels to talk about their experiences all the time. So you're part of this SAIS family and community that has a pretty good name recognition within the fields that we put graduates into. It's a little subdued. It's not as name brand as some of the business schools or law schools. It's a little sneaky like that, but it's very popular and very potent. So.
Well, just to add to that, SAIS may not be a household word across the entire United States, but it is in Washington.
Yeah.
When you just say SAIS in Washington, employers all know what that means. There's a package. It's a SAIS package. They know you've got language, economics, strong academics, and some sense of policy. That sort of package is very well understood, and they know you write well, brief well, have been in an environment that's forced you to grapple with difficult problems. And the other thing is, a lot of our students, I don't know how many, maybe 30 or so, go into the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. And I'm told when they go to the big jobs fair, where all of the agencies have desks, most of the desks are manned by SAIS graduates, and it helps. So there's a little thing going on there.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time because I know everybody's ready for the wine and cheese reception. I was originally going to ask maybe one regret or something that you wish you had done while you were at SAIS, but I don't want to end on such a negative note. So maybe as a final roundup, we can have like one resounding piece of advice you would give to incoming students.
I got mine. I wish I had woken up earlier every day when I was in grad school. It's very rare that you get these 2 years of your life where you have, everybody's worked before with the exception of a few students, and you're coming here and you have 2 years to manage your schedule, to focus on whatever you want to focus on, to develop any skills that you want to develop, and it's really incumbent upon you to take advantage of all the opportunities. The number of events that happen here, the number of people you can interact with, the alumni you can build relationships with, and the faculty, you can fill every single day within these walls with interesting things that you know nothing about, that you have the opportunity to learn about. And it's really, it's an amazing experience, and you don't get that after you graduate. And I would encourage people to take advantage of that.
We'll work on a SAIS alarm clock.
I think for me, one person here on the faculty at the time, when I was here earlier on, mentioned, oh, why don't you get involved in the Financial Services Committee and chair it? So that's one thing I didn't do, and would have been perfect to lead that effort, since there's not a lot of folks with financial services background here, so that would be the only thing I would do differently.
I guess I'd say I would recommend you read everything on the curriculum at least once. And every morning class where I shorted it by skimming something as opposed to reading it in depth or in maybe a second time is just an opportunity you don't get back because of the really terrific learning situation with faculty and classmates here.
Yeah, I would just say wallow in it. And by that I mean, don't worry if you come here or if you go to another school, don't worry too much about your career. Yes, apply for jobs and all of that, but don't try and plan it out too carefully. It's maybe the last time in your life when you'll have the opportunity to really just delve into everything in depth, in discussions, reading, classes, private meetings with faculty. Just explore as much as you can, learn as much as you can, because when you leave and you go into one of those jobs that I just talked about, it's up at 6 o'clock, 5:30 every morning, on the job till late in the day, dealing with what's coming in over the transom. The most common complaint you hear is, I don't have time to think. That's kind of the work world out there. So use this time to really just immerse yourself in everything that graduate school can give you. It'll pay off. Oh, you wanted to see the magic trick, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Well, I'll take my pocket handkerchief here and see what I can do. Just sort of,